Missed the best part. Play it again. Can't really say much more than that lyric. It's one sentence. In wonder, I stand in wonder at the miracle of you, Osho. That is the experience of one who finds out that in this lifetime they have a master, and then finds that master and then recognizes that master as such. That's really all that can be said about the experience. Well, a lot of things can be said, but it encapsulates the mysteriousness, unbelievableness, amazingness of it. You do. From that day on, just stand in wonder. If you're like most people, most disciples, you do a few other things. You run your ego trips, play your mind games, go to work, eat your breakfast, argue with your friends, whatever, whatever floats your boat. But if you really have entered discipleship for real, if it's really captured you, and that's what it is, you don't decide it, it decides you. Then no matter what else you're doing, you're just standing in wonder. You just can't believe it. The way a little child would stand in awe the first time you take it to the Grand Canyon, the first time that child has ever seen a natural wonder that's so awe-inspiring. It's just like that. It takes your breath away. You don't know how to really relate to it, because all you can do is stand there transfixed. Because you didn't create it, you didn't make it, you just are looking at it and experiencing it. And you can't really explain how you got there, how it got to you. And I'll tell you something. I hear people talk, I read, my whole entertainment is this. Spiritual stuff, spiritual events, spiritual books. I'm bored with everything else. Everything else doesn't appeal to me anymore. And you read from time to time, or you hear somebody say, somebody who's a disciple or a devotee, and they say, well, when I think of my master, Why is it so special to me? Why is it so wonderful? Because it takes me to God. It reminds me of God. It reminds me of truth. It reminds me of the totality. And I've heard that, I don't know, maybe hundreds of times. Read it maybe hundreds of times. And I always chuckle. Because this is not the statement of a true disciple. It's the opposite. When you think of God, when you notice truth, it reminds you of your master. The love, the totality of the love, the totality of the immersion is in that one. Because that one is not abstract, not conceptual. It's a living, breathing, or was a living, breathing person. And you fall so utterly in love that you don't care about God, you don't care about truth, you don't care about eternity, infinity, you don't care about any of the things I talk about constantly. Now you know the truth. Because you're too lost in love. You don't want God. You want your master. It's unbelievable. You can't even imagine it until it happens to you. And only if it happens to you. There's no correlate. There's nothing to compare it to in other life situations, other types of love relationships, even your children. It's so beyond everything. So you feel really done. What more can I be given? What more can happen to me, good or bad, that would matter more than this, that would add to or take away from this? Nothing. You don't, I guess I should say I. It'd probably sound egotistical if I did. I'll keep saying you. You don't worry anymore about the ultimate, because the ultimate has already happened. And you don't know what it means, and you don't know how, and you don't know why. And you never will. And you know you never will. And it doesn't matter. Now, everybody and every life doesn't include having a spiritual master. We know that. But in those that do, it's the miracle of all miracles. If you could fly just as you are, or balance two skyscrapers on the end of your fingers at the same time, that would not be as great a miracle as a genuine master enters your life. So you can still get caught up in all kinds of confusions and nonsense and all manner of things, but eventually you'll just settle back into that recognition that this is more than the most. This is more than the most possible. So that's my birthday eve testimony. And if you really have surrendered, what you find is, and that's why I made the statement a minute ago that God reminds you of your master, not the other way around. Because you find that you really aren't anymore. You know, the language has its own twist. So people say, you live your life, or you live in the world, or you live on earth. The prepositions. All the prepositions are over. You don't live in your life, you don't live in your body, you don't live in the world, you don't live on the earth, you live in your master. That's all there is. It's unbelievable. You can't know it unless you've fallen so absolutely in love that then you know. Then the surrender is so complete that you just suddenly notice that that's all there is for you. That's all there's going to be for you. And it's more than you could ever hope for. You couldn't have imagined it if you tried. If somebody explains it to you, it doesn't compute until it happens to you. I would certainly never have believed it. But here I am testifying it to you, sharing the wondrousness of it. To me, it's the final, only absolute and conclusive proof of everything. The mystery of all that is no longer has a question mark. It's replaced by an exclamation point. And I've said it before. I wonder sometimes when I've said it if you even believe me. But when I see a mountain, I see Osho. I don't see a mountain. When I look at the horizon, at a large sky, I see Osho. When I look into your eyes, I see Osho. I don't look anywhere without seeing Osho. It's impossible to imagine. It can only be experienced. Okay, that's my birthday. Happy birthday, Osho speech. because I'm not going to make any speeches tomorrow. I'm just going to dance. So I have to make it tonight. And I've been fortunate to be in the company of many masters. And what I'm saying is universal. I'm addressing it to Osho. I'm saying it about Osho because my beloved is Osho. But any genuine master, any genuine disciple, this is the situation. This is the potential, let's say. It's a big surprise, you know? It's a big surprise to find out that the best thing there is something you never heard of. Or only have heard of in passing, or don't know much about, or because everybody's heard of all the things that are supposed to be fulfilling, are supposed to make life worth living, are supposed to bring you great joy and happiness. You know, money, fame, power, you know the list. It's a wild shock to find out that it's actually none of those things, and only the master can fulfill. It doesn't seem comprehensible, but the shock of it shows you that it's true. I mean, you see it for yourself, you know it for yourself, and the shock is phenomenal because nobody told you. And it's not, you know, from the first second. You have to grow into it, you have to mature into it, that understanding of the real meaning of it, the real depth of it, the real finality of it. But when you do, the shock is just immense. Because this isn't what you were trying to get. This isn't what you were after. Maybe you were after God. Maybe you were after fame. Maybe anything. You name it, anything. Even everything that comes under the category spiritual. It's all pale in comparison. I don't need God. I have Osho. I know God is because of the miracle of Osho. I'm willing to accept the proof. The conclusive and irrefutable proof. Not every person is willing to accept the irrefutable proof. You have to actually accept it, not just know it, or be shown it, or be given it, or be told it. You have to actually draw the only possible conclusion. So there is, a part you have to do. Okay, so we don't have to continue talking about that. We are opening the floor for all reports, questions, comments, thoughts, party ideas. We know we've already planned the party. And we'll have lots of good things for vegetarians, but there will be sushi. Because I like sushi. Okay, it's your turn.
You talk about trusting God, trusting existence.
Well, I could, but I'd rather not. Because what I just talked about is better. What do you need to trust for if you know? Then trust is irrelevant. Trust is only necessary if you're still, and it's quite valuable. I'm not denigrating trust. I'm all for trust. Don't misunderstand. But why settle for silver if you can have gold? Trust is important if in even the slightest amount, even a tiny, tiny bit, doubt still assails you. Doubt still can get a hold of you. But that whole testimony I just gave you is another way of saying that when you really recognize if your life includes having a master and you really recognize that master, then doubt can't touch you ever again. You see how doubt is just circular, just feeds on itself. There's a time and a place where it's very useful analytically to come to a certain conclusion or get the right answer or make a choice, but most people are using doubt all the time when you don't need it. Skepticism is absolutely the way to go if you ask me, but not endlessly. Then you just go round and round and you ask more and more refined questions and get better and better answers and figure things out better if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, you just get more depressed because the doubt eats at you. But either way, it's a statement that you don't really know, which is perfectly acceptable. And then trust can help you. Then trust becomes a true rock to stand on. But the trust has to be real, not a hope that it'll all work out or a hope that you'll get to the right place or get to the right understanding. But the trust has to be based on what you already know for real, what you're already sure about, what you already know beyond any doubt. Then the trust means something. And that doesn't mean you have to go to great lengths to create something. I'm sure if you're in this room, you already have enough evidence, you already have enough knowing, you already have enough understanding to grow any degree or amount of trust you need. But if trust feels like an issue for you, it just means you haven't done it yet. You haven't sat down soberly, looked at what you actually know, and planted yourself on it squarely so that you're on solid ground. Trust is the feeling of standing on solid ground. But better than that is knowing absolutely. But until you know absolutely, the best you can do is tremendous love. And if tremendous love happens, the trust is automatic. If you can't do tremendous love, if you can't open your heart enough, then sure, cultivate trust. That's the third rank. But I always recommend the first rank. If you can't swing it, do the second rank. If you can't swing the second, by all means, make your life all about learning how to trust. The third rank is better than the 4,621 ranks below. And when you really accomplish it, when you really are able to trust, rank number 2 and rank number 1 aren't that far away. It becomes a real possibility as a jumping off point. But if you haven't reached even trust, and most people haven't, you've got a lot of work ahead of you. So the only question becomes, are you willing to do the work? And there are only 2 roads. There really are only 2 roads. All spiritual events, all worldly events can be categorized in a bifurcated way. There's only 2 possibilities: the way of knowledge, the way of wisdom, and the way of love, the way of the heart. Those are the only 2 paths there are. Everything else falls under one or the other category. And if the path of wisdom is the right path for you, and you succeed at it, it'll take you to the path of love. That's like the river, feeding into the ocean. And if the path of love is the right path for you, you'll find that wisdom develops along the way. They're hand in hand. They can be talked about as separate, but in a way they're not separate. It's useful to see them as separate, because most people do have a tending toward one or the other. If you're more mental, you'll feel more attracted to the path of wisdom, the path of knowledge, the path of knowing. But that's not necessarily conclusive. You may still be really on the path of love. But if you feel called to the path of love, if you feel like a lover, then you're fortunate, because then you're on the superhighway right away. Because nothing works better than love. That's the turbocharged way.
I haven't said anything for a couple of weeks because this has happened. It happened probably about a month ago. And I wanted to let it sit a little while to make sure it was real. And that it didn't go away. But it hasn't gone away. It's gotten stronger. And I still don't really get it. I don't understand it. But what's happened is, a long time ago, when I first came here, I said to you, I want to go home. And that came from my heart. It came out of my mouth before I knew. And what's happened is you have become home. I've finally recognized that that's you. And there's no more vibrant, strong attraction to anything in my life. Everything falls way short of that attraction. It's absolutely more interesting for me to think of you, your vibration, and even listening to your words, surrounding myself with you instead of going towards anything else.
Isn't that a miracle?
Absolutely.
Don't tell your husband.
I'm not about to. Turn that off. Yeah, or my children.
Yeah, every spouse, every child is always, if there's a real master, if a person has fallen in love like you're describing, then it's natural for there to be jealousy, even if they don't speak it, even if they don't admit it. It's impossible almost for it not to be, unless they're walking along with you in the same direction. But since often they're not, you have to expect a little bit of turbulence. So that's the same miracle that I was testifying, now you're testifying. So if you fall all the way into it, if you allow it to completely take over everything, then everything I testified will be true for you too. Then you'll see that there's a finality that can't be explained, but that is very wonderful and beautiful. But it becomes impossible to yearn, eventually, it becomes impossible to yearn for anything ever again, because the fulfillment feels so complete. And then for the rest of your life, you just stand in wonder. So, do you see that it isn't about trusting anything or anyone?
Mm-hmm.
Trust seems paltry compared to this.
Mm-hmm. And the most surprising part of it is when you said you don't yearn for God. All my life I've yearned for God. All my life my being's consumed with the idea of God, but God expresses differently now. I still don't understand it. The words even sound strange to my own ears.
Mm-hmm. But when I was giving my statement, you understood it. It didn't sound strange, because you know what I'm talking about. You know the experience.
I do.
You know what it feels like. Good for you. So now leave it alone. Don't watch it. Don't try to do anything with it. The seed has germinated. Gardener's job is done. Let the sun and the rain, the wind take care of the rest. Because, people are crazy. So you can get all kinds of ideas that now that I see this, now that I feel this, what should I do? You don't do anything. You enjoy it. You fall deeper. You allow yourself to be taken by it. Like any other falling in love. So you're coming to the Osho birthday party tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you come, really celebrate. Because the one to thank for what you are reporting is Osho. So celebrate as your thank you. Because how could I serve this function for you if there wasn't Osho? So at least attain trust. At least get to the third rank if you haven't yet. Now you know what the purpose of life is. The purpose of life is to at least get to the third rank. If you weren't sure, you thought it was something else, and you haven't at least gotten to absolute trust, then at the very least, make your life about getting to that. Because less than that, and you will never be really satisfied. You'll always feel like something is still missing. No matter what else you attain, you'll feel like something's missing. Even if you're happy, most of the time, you'll still feel like something is incomplete. Unless you at least get to the third rank. At least that. That's the minimum to really be on solid ground. Until then, you are subject to every wind that blows. So you don't need to figure out the meaning of life. You don't need the wisest philosophy ever devised. You just need to get to the third rank. You just need to become a human being who's able to trust in a big way. Really, if you think about it intelligently, why not? You really don't have any alternative because you don't know anything. You don't know how your heart beats. You don't know how your eyes see. You don't know how you're able to walk and talk and think and feel. You don't know how you got here. You don't know when you're leaving. You don't know where you're going next, if anywhere. You don't know a damn thing. Because of that, the only thing that makes sense is to trust. If you actually could know something for real, then we'd be having a whole different conversation. And by know, I mean you can explain it absolutely. But you can't explain anything. You can only say this is a towel. You can't explain anything about it. You can describe it, but that's not explaining it, how it's here, how it works, how the molecules of it are possible, how you can hold it in your hand, how you can wipe your forehead with it. You can't give any reasonable explanation that holds any water for anything. For your fingernail, nothing. Nothing. Every feeling or idea that you know something or can explain is just a false sense. An attempt to be comfortable, attempt to not feel insecure, not feel at risk, in danger. Because we're all in this together, we're all in this mystery, unexplainable by anyone. And a mystery is not about safety. So any idea or feeling of safety is a created effect. It's not real. You have no way to account for time and space. You have no way to account for yourself or anything that's ever happened to you or will ever happen. You have no way to account for anything. You only think you do because you've maybe been taught that, this means that. You can explain this way. If you water the flower, it grows. But that doesn't explain a flower. The mechanics is not the explanation. The description is not the explanation. We have no explanations. It's an unexplainable universe. So your only real option is to trust. Anything less than that is, pardon my bluntness, quite foolish. The intelligent option is to trust. The reasonable conclusion is to trust. Otherwise, you're in the middle of the ocean without a paddle. Does that answer your question? See, I ended up talking about trust. I didn't even want to.
I know.
But just understand that it's the third rank. It's a third option. It's not the best option. It's the best option if the other two are not available yet. And then you can use trust to climb up to the higher.
I know that I don't know how to say it. I mean, there's existence is right. I trust. I just want it to be different. That's all.
Yeah, well, that's just the human mind.
But I know that what is that which is beyond. I can't say anything about it, but there's there's no wrong in it. I mean, there's only what it knows, what it has to be. And that's what it has to be. It's right. Not right against wrong, but just
What is.
the divine. Or the, what is. I know.
That's how I say it. What is. Somebody asked me the other day to talk about surrender, to explain surrender a little bit, and I said no, because it was a person who likes to play with doubt and has been confusing themselves needlessly for a lifetime. It's one of the commonest games there is, the self-created game of confusion. So I didn't want to make any comment because I wanted that person to work harder to come out of the confusion. Because there are people and there are times when they have to really work their way out a little bit. You can't pull them out because you can, but they'll just fall back. So you've got to not help them too much. Make them work a little. But that's all surrender is. If you really want an operative definition. Then you have to understand that it doesn't mean that you don't still want things a certain way. Surrender doesn't mean you're not human. It means you actually get to the point where you fully and completely recognize that what is so dwarfs how you think it should be, or what you would like, or your preference, or your dream. So makes it so meaningless, your position, that you actually get it. You actually get it, that it doesn't matter what is. It doesn't matter that you want it this way or that way. When you really get it, you can't help but surrender to the fact of it. See, people have these mushy notions of what surrender means. It really means accepting the facts. And the facts are relatively basic, simple. We don't know anything. We can't explain anything. And yet all this is. And what happens, happens. And if you really deeply ponder and emotionally enter that, accept that, see that, it's gigantic. It isn't conceptual. It's beyond gigantic. It's too small a word. It flattens you. And surrender means what it says. You give up. You give up having the silly notion that you need to get your way. You know better than existence. You really give it up. you lose all your arrogance, all your self-importance. But you really lose it, once and for all. Not it can sneak back in. You really lose it. And you can get there by really entering the factualness of it, by really seeing it. You don't have to wait for there to be a master. I will tell you straight out, the moment, I know the exact moment this happened for me. The first time I looked in Osho's eyes, 1 foot away. The first time we looked at each other. Not the first time I saw his picture. The first time I saw his picture, I knew he was my master. That was years before. But the flattening happened the first time our eyes met. And no moment will ever surpass that moment. Because it was all done in one split second. If you made a movie of it, I can give you the experience. I'm a very visual guy. I can give you the experience. I can describe exactly what it was like. It really is. I really saw almost a picture of it, you could say, that I just collapsed into a grain of sand. I became a grain. I recognized that I'm just a grain of sand. That was the effect of looking into Osho's eyes and him looking back at me. But it was within a framework of the totality. It was exactly like this. I experienced myself as a grain of sand, but in the middle of absolute infinity, vast beyond description and stretching endlessly in all directions. So how small do you feel compared to all of infinity, endlessly? And I really had this feeling of a grain of sand. It was really experiential. It was really like I was wondering how I was even this big. Because after all, I'm a grain of sand. How am I 5 foot whatever? And you don't reconstitute after that. It's not like then I expanded back out and became a person. I'm still that grain of sand in the middle of endlessness. You never get taken over by the illusion anymore. That's the power of the tremendous master. One glance and it's over. One glance and you know your true proportion. It really feels like a steamroller ran over you. You never get your breath again. I will die never having recovered my breath from that second. It finishes you. But for that to be possible, you have to really love your master. Because that total love creates the willingness to be flattened like that. Otherwise, you'll push it away, you'll resist. You'll find an excuse to feel bigger than a grain of sand. You won't allow your yourself to see for real. You'll keep pretending that something different is going on. You'll spin some story for yourself. You know, maybe you'll have a big experience looking into the Master's eyes, but it won't be what I'm talking about. Because that's the end. You're finished. You've been steamrolled once and for all. You don't get up from that. So the possibility has to be there to be flattened. Life can do it. Life is trying to flatten you. Anything can do it. It isn't required that it be in the form of a human master. Anything that flattens you that way is your master. It can be a puppy dog. You know, there's a famous master who died, I think 1960, 62, whatever, Ramana Maharshi, very famous, considered a saint by many people. Probably was. His ashram in India is still visited by thousands all the time, considered a very holy place. And he had his ashram there at the foot of a mountain, Arunchala, Mount Arunchala. He said, "This is my master, this mountain. This holy mountain is my master." He didn't have a human master. He had a mountain for a master. But he must have felt something toward this mountain. It must have flattened him somehow to where he saw the truth. And he never left. When he came to that mountain, he said, "I found my master." He lived there, I don't know the exact number, 40, 45, 50 more years till he died. He never left the foot of that mountain ever again. And he came there very young. He was, I believe it was in his teens, late teens. So you don't have to despair if all this talk of masters, these mystical phenomena, seems too remote. Oh, that'll never happen for me, or I wouldn't even want that to happen. I certainly would have said that before I first saw a picture of Osho. I would have said, "Are you crazy? Why would I want that?" But it can be anything. It doesn't have to be a person.
Does it always happen in this love at first sight type of thing that we just talked about?
No, it doesn't have to be love at first sight. Because human beings do things every which way. And love at first sight is certainly possible. But that doesn't mean that it'll always happen that way for everybody. So there's no set way. There's no criteria. This is how it has to be. It's the result that matters. Are you flat? Do you get it? That you're a grain of sand? Do you get it? That what is? Do you get it? That trust is better than everything else that comes before it? Do you get it? That existence might know better how things should be than what your idea is of how things should be? Do you get it? That you are not the final authority? Because until then, we kind of think we are. That's called ego. So no, there's no way it has to happen, including it doesn't have to be through a human spiritual master. But that's the commonest way. That's the way that the most people report success. Someone who says, this mountain is my master, that hasn't happened very often. A couple of times in 10,000 years. So to assume you're the exception is always shaky ground. Those are the exceptions. People always say about Osho, well, Osho didn't have a master. But they don't know. They don't know. Yes, he didn't have a human master in his lifetime, but they don't know what functioned or who functioned as his master for real. He addressed it. He spoke about it when he was asked about it. So let me make that point. Let me say it that way. There has to be a master. Otherwise, the ego remains. All the ways to avoid surrender continue. And you're caught up in it, and you never reach anything meaningful or fulfilling. You just go around in circles. Maybe better circles if you're lucky. But they're still circles. They're still not the real deal. For the real deal, you have to absolutely be flattened. And that can only happen by you recognizing that you are not the authority. You are not sitting at the top of existence. Your opinion is not the one that matters. The only one that matters is existence. That's the only opinion that matters. What is. Somehow, you have to absolutely get it that what is. The getting of that flattens you. Unless you're in the position of a disciple, which means one who has surrendered, one who no longer falsely believes themselves the final authority. And that doesn't mean disciple of a person, of a living spiritual master, like I've told the story. It can be a mountain. For at least one great spiritual teacher, it was a mountain. It can be literally anything. But the experience has to occur of being dethroned from your own arrogance, your own sense that somehow you can get the answer. You can't get the answer. You can spend your whole life chasing for it, and that's what sincere people do. The average person doesn't chase for it at all, doesn't even care. He's too busy watching TV or trying to make money or whatever. That's a whole other story. But those who desire something more, something real, the most common story is they spend their entire lives chasing after the real answer and they never get it. Because they haven't allowed themselves yet to be properly, appropriately, correctly humbled. When I looked into Osho's eyes, that was the humbling. It's the most wonderful moment possible. You know, our connotation, we hear the word humbling, it sounds like something bad's being done to us. It's the most wonderful thing that can happen to you. Because now you're not being fooled by your own mind, by your own ego. Now you don't think you're something you're not. Now you know that everything is fine. Until then, you don't really have any way to know that. You just hope everything will turn out fine. And that literally guarantees you sooner or later sadness, misery, depression, hopelessness, fear, anguish, whatever. All of the above, or choose your favorite. Sooner or later. That's why I say you have to get at least to the third rank, at least to trust. Because until then, you're subject to the agonies that plague human beings. After that, you're still subject to those agonies, but you are accepting of it so deeply that it doesn't matter anymore. Because you're not really deep down trying to make it otherwise. Which really amounts to somehow not really letting yourself accept the fact of death. All of it amounts to a running away from the factuality of death. When you're flattened, when you're steamrolled, it includes death. You don't fight anymore. You don't, on some level, in some way, pretend to yourself that death isn't coming, or that it's so far away that it doesn't matter. So, death is the great equalizer. Until you've accepted the fact of death for real, not just you know you're going to die. You're still proclaiming yourself the master. Really, the master of the universe. Death is the proof that you ain't that. It's the universal background for everything. And until you face it squarely and don't cringe from it, run from it, faint in fear from it, pretend it isn't so, find a way to avoid it even for another moment, then you are guaranteed, at some point at least, some experience of fear, some experience of agony, some experience of turmoil, some experience of confusion. Something that amounts to a position, without realizing that you've taken a position, something that amounts to a position of what isn't. Because it's unacceptable to me. It's not what I want. I don't want to die. Nobody wants to die. But have you accepted that you actually are gonna? Really accept it, not just because you know everyone and everything dies. That's in itself enough. If you really accept it, then death is your master. Whatever dethrones you is your master. Whatever takes you off of the foolish position of declaring yourself king or queen, and then living out the arrogance of that in a small or big way. Whatever flattens you brings you to the truth. Liberates you from all your mistaken notions. The biggest one being that somehow what is isn't. So really, spiritual life is nothing more and nothing less than the willingness to accept the facts. Until you actually can, many things help you move closer. But it's not good enough. It's not the end point to simply cultivate those things and be moving closer and closer. You've got to get to the end. You've got to actually get there. And you're working against the clock. So that's the challenge. That's why it's not for everybody. Because not everybody is willing to take up the challenge. So if a master comes in your life, it's like a bucket of cold water thrown on you. The master's presence really says, hey, you can avoid the challenge, but at your own detriment. It's really a reminder that it's foolish to keep avoiding. And it's so potent a reminder, if it is your master, or even if it's not, it's just a master who is very attractive to you, somehow you feel a pull. Even that's enough in many cases. It simply helps you take up the challenge that life itself is. To get to the truth. So tomorrow we'll celebrate the 78th birthday of one who, even almost 19 years now since his death, continues to help millions of people toward the truth. You know, you see me sitting here, you see me walking, you see me talking. You see me do all kinds of stuff. But don't be fooled. None of that is the real thing that's going on. The real thing that's going on is, since that flattening, only one thing. I am just eternally at Osho's feet. May something even 1/1,000,000th as good as that happen to you.